Okay.
Sharing the screen because there's nobody on the other end.
Okay.
So if you just pull that up. Where are you sliding?
Okay, on there?
There you go. Looks like you are now.
Okay. Oh. All right. I don't know how to get rid of that. Not a big deal. You don't think so? Really? All set. Let's do it. How are you? I can't. I know.
We're going to call the meeting to order.
That's right. Certainly. Yeah, I can do that, Mr. Chair. So, hi, everybody. I've had the pleasure of meeting everybody. Of course, my name is Alan Nielsen. I'm one of the consultants for the committee. My colleague Sherry Hurst, also one of the consultants. And we don't have anybody, Mr. Chair, from the province this evening. There was our provincial representative, David Van Omen, had something he couldn't get out of. I think it was a family issue or something. So we don't have anybody from the province online. We do, however, have regional district folks with us, Corey Griffiths, Deputy CAO, and Sandy Horning, who's our committee clerk for this evening. And perhaps should we let committee members introduce themselves, or?
Sure. My name's Eric Dennison, and I'm a resident and a committee member. For a while. It's Anderson, local. Daryl, also local.
Excellent.
Nobody.
We are Central Oakland West.
Perfect.
Director. Yeah.
Great. Okay, that takes care of the introductions, Chair. So I'll leave it to you to adopt the agenda in the minutes and so forth.
So we need a motion that the July 2022 electoral area west and northwest side government and service committee study committee agenda to be adopted. So please. Adoption of minutes. Of the electoral area west and northwest side government service committee meetings, minutes of May 19th, 2022 be adopted.
All right. So shall I begin then? Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Chair. So I always like to start these meetings just by providing that bigger context again on where we are, that bigger picture, as it were, the purpose of the study and how it kind of fits into the bigger potential study or potential process. So we'll just very briefly remind the committee of a few things. We are in the first phase of what could be a much larger process, or not a much larger process, but a larger process. And as we know from our slides that we've seen before, we've had our issues raised. We're now the original district has requested the study be done. This committee has been struck and is underway now. Options for change are going to be raised at this meeting and then considered a little bit more through the report and at our next meeting as well. We'll identify those, assess those. All of those parts in green there are the study we're working on now. The changes then that come out of this study, the proposed changes from the committee, if those are within the current structure, and that is within the regional district Central Okanagan that features the northwest side as part of Central Okanagan West electoral area. So in other words, it leaves all of that intact, but it looks at changes within that structure, then the study will end. Conversely, if the committee puts forward recommendations to look at changes to the structure, then those changes will go to the RDCO for recommendations to the board, and we'll make that presentation on September 26th. If the RDCO agrees with those and chooses then to recommend them to the minister will consider that advice, and the minister can choose at that point to commission a new phase, and that new phase will begin. And that's where that possible additional phase comes in. So again, if we look at changes that are focused primarily outside of the current structure, so a change to either the number of electoral areas or a change to the boundary of the regional district, then that would be part of a broader, more detailed study that the province would commission coming out of that. So our focus again on the initial phase prior to getting to this idea. Our study has a threefold purpose. As we know, the first is to document and assess the current governance and services. So we're looking really then at kind of what is in place. We want to engage to understand concerns and interests of the community. And then we want to also identify changes to consider. So tonight's meeting really focuses primarily on the second part of that purpose. That is the concerns and the interests that we've heard as a committee from the community. And we're still in the process, we're still in the middle of getting that information back from the community, because as we'll find out, the survey has been extended. And so we'll get some more information back through that process. But we did want to have this check-in with the committee post open houses to get a sense as to what we're hearing now as a committee. And we're going to spend some time this evening as well on the options that the committee may want to start considering, the options for change, that is. We'll talk about at a higher level some options that the committee may want to consider for changes within the current structure, and we'll also look at changes to the structure. Not to preempt or to prejudge what the committee may ultimately decide once it gets the full amount of community input back from the survey and from other discussions that may occur between now and then, but simply to get on the committee's radar some different ideas that it may want to start thinking about. So on that note, Mr. Chair, if it's okay to move on, and we'll kind of get right into the community input that we've heard. And what we thought we would do is start off by talking a little bit about just reminding the committee, first of all, the process, the engagement process that we have been involved in and that we continue to be involved in, and then get into some of the consultants' observations. Again, so we as kind of the impartial third-party consultants to the committee and to the community on this study, we thought it'd be helpful to kind of give our impressions of what the information that we received back from the community, and then importantly, allow the committee and its members to put ideas, put information on the table, input that it's received or feedback it's received from the community. And I know, Mr. Chair, that you have co-signed the letter that went around to everybody, so we'll certainly feature an opportunity to go through that letter and hear that input too. So let's talk a little bit about, let's just remind ourselves about the community input and the more importantly, the engagement process in which we are engaged now or involved now. We've had our 4 community open houses. We did that over a 4-week period between June 8th and July 7th. We had the overview publication, which gave a distilled version from the interim report of what is currently, and that is, and so that was all on Westside governance and services. And as the committee knows, that was presented and available at the open houses, but it was also mailed hard copy to all households in the Westside, and digital copies are available and remain available online at your say at rdco.com or .rdco.com. We had this, or we had, and we continue to have the survey on governance and services for residents to complete. And so that has been extended until early August 12th to be exact. So we had originally talked about ending it at the end of the last open house, but after consultation discussions with the chair and vice chair, and I communicated this to everybody, we decided to extend that a little bit. I'll go through a little bit later in the meeting the implications of that extension for the overall study timeline, which the overall timeline doesn't change, but some of the steps in between now and then and the end of the study will change. And finally, we had committee outreach to neighbors. And so as a representative committee of the Westside, what you talk about with your neighbors and your friends in the community is obviously important, and you will act as a very important conduit for that information, for that feedback to come back to the committee and to help inform the committee's discussions and options going forward. So that's an important part of the community input too. Moving into the consultant's observations, a few things. We will kind of start by talking about kind of on the study and on the process, if you will, and then we'll kind of get into some observations that we heard, some input on governance stuff, so decision-making and the model in place, and then a little bit about services as well. So when we, a few things that we kind of highlighted from our work in our presence here and our interactions with members of the community primarily through the open houses. First of all, I think it's fair to say the turnout probably not as strong in the open houses as the committee may have preferred. It wasn't by any means kind of a failure or anything like that, but it just wasn't as strong as we would have wanted. And that's not unique to this community. That is often the case, particularly coming out of pandemic, summer, lots of different factors conspiring against us. Not as strong as we might have hoped, but not by any stretch anything to be concerned about or worried about. The surveys that are still ongoing, as I noted, they will add to and they'll help to round out some of the interests and the concerns that we heard from the community. So everything we talk about this evening is a little bit kind of the preliminary findings, as it were, and we'll go through the surveys. And there have been about 85 surveys now returned to us. So we'll go through those 75 online, and then we've got about 10 that we received from the open houses themselves. So, and I know that we continue to promote that through social media, through posters and other mechanisms too. So that information will be brought in and help to inform round out the interests and the concerns. One comment, which is very happy to make, and it is perhaps, while not unique to the Westside, certainly is not always the norm, unfortunately, but it has been the case here, and that's wonderful. And that is that all discussions, certainly that we participated in through the open houses, very civil, very respectful. Yes, definitely some strong views presented, as one would hope in these kinds of exercises and one would expect, but many people really coming out in a genuine way to seek understanding, to talk to the committee, to talk to the electoral area director, the consultants and their neighbors to get an understanding of how the system currently works and to share views on that system. An interest in understanding the options for sure, including those within the current structure. So some of the discussion has been focused on looking at RDNO as a possibility, and that's legitimate. Some, though, has also been on what changes can we make within the structure. So I think there's been a nice healthy mix of those two different approaches. I'll move on if we could, Mr. Chair, and we'll just kind of jump, and then we'll pause at the end of our observations and get some feedback from the committee as well. When we look now at governance, if we kind of try to focus some observations on the governance aspects that we in the governance model that we presented through the open house. So first of all, is that one point that came out fairly clearly through our open houses and the discussions and the questions not only on the floor, but also in the one-on-one discussions that we had with different members of the community, is that the model of governance, which is not unique to regional districts. So every regional district, as the committee knows, has that model of governance that has that looks at different levels of representation based on population, that looks at different voting rules, and has different outcomes as a result of those voting rules. That model is not unique to RDCO. We made that point during the open houses. What is unique to RDCO, however, is the dominance of the city of Kelowna on the RDCO board. That's a function of frankly of its size. It's purely of its size and the voting unit as well that has been chosen for RDCO. So that came up as a concern in the community based on in the discussions that we had. And that's perhaps not surprising because whenever we have one player that is, by virtue of its voting strength and by virtue of its number of directors, has the ability, in essence, if they all vote together, to determine outcomes of votes, that's always going to be a concern to those who aren't in that group. So no surprise there, perhaps. Water service was identified as an issue in the discussions at the open houses. The cost increase was identified as an issue, and some of the concerns going forward on what could happen to those costs going forward. As RDCO, as a public institution, and like every other water purveyor, has to do certain things to meet new standards. So there's going to be costs. In the same way there are costs in the city of Kelowna and other places, and even with private water purveyors. But that still came out as a concern. And related to that concern, I think, was not just the cost itself, but also concerns and what we heard from members of the public about transparency and accountability. So understanding the cost, being apprised of those costs. So concerns around transparency or lack thereof, and concerns around accountability, because those decisions really are made by the board, irrespective of what the elected representatives of this jurisdiction may wish. The governance system, one of the things we did here, not just kind of concerns about the system, but interest in the system and even a defense of the system on the part of some constituents. So the governance system, a couple of people talked about, it does require collaboration. That said, collaboration is possible in a federation type system. And we should also keep in mind, the point was made by some observers that the system, the difference in representation among the different jurisdictions is a reflection of the liability that is held by the amount of liability that would be held for regional district services by those larger jurisdictions, and also the contributions that they make to overall regional services. So there is some rhyme and reason, as it were, for the difference in the levels of representation. That said, one of the observations that, or one of the concerns that arose during the open houses is the idea that the representation for the two electoral areas combined is considerably lower than for that of the municipalities. And so while we only have 4 municipalities versus 2 electoral areas, we do have much larger municipalities compared to the electoral areas. And so we consequently have quite an imbalance there between the incorporated entities and the unincorporated jurisdictions. And that really, the concern there comes back to the idea of one function of the RDCO as the local government for the electoral areas being to advocate to other agencies, provincial government, transportation, for example, about the needs for the electoral areas and the concern there because they're underrepresented, because they're so small compared to the municipalities and the broader role of the regional district is that it's perceived to impact advocacy efforts. Sticking with governance for a moment, if I may. So there is an interest in understanding the voting numbers in the North Okanagan. So we talked about that system of governance being the same across all regional districts. How that plays out in any vote based on voting strength, number of directors is going to be different. So some interest was expressed in understanding what it would mean to go to that other jurisdiction, that other regional district. We made the point and it was discussed in some degree, to some length in the open houses, that these studies these studies around governance and services, these types of initiatives are very, they do touch on emotions, they do touch on values, and they touch on this sense of connection. So that sense of connection to broader feeling of community is important. And one of the things that we tested on folks at the open houses, you'll recall, is where they feel that affinity to. Is it to the central Okanagan? Is it elsewhere? And while we did hear some residents talking about how they see Kelowna as their or West Kelowna in some cases as their commercial center, and they do have a connection to those other jurisdictions. Clearly, we heard from many more people that they look north to Vernon and other places and have a stronger sense of connection to those areas. One of the concerns that came out during the meetings is the concern that there's no electoral area committee right now at the regional district, and it was noted that sets RDCO apart from other places. I will note, and this will come up a little bit later, that there is, I understand, an initiative underway now at the regional district to start looking at that, and so that may be of comfort to folks who identify this as a concern. We'll talk a little bit more about the electoral area committee and the services committee and how that would work as a potential option for change a little bit later. And a concern, I guess, a perception, or in some cases was expressed as an experience, that the regional district is not as responsive as it could be to local issues. And so that was raised a number of times in relation to inquiries made about fire, inquiries made about water, about certain services, and community parks was another one that was identified in that respect. Moving on to services, just very quickly, just one slide on here, Mr. Chair. So roads clearly identified, and this is not at all unique to Northwest Side. We hear this in every electoral area, and we hear this indeed in many municipalities. Roads identified as a service of significant concern in the kind of the condition of the roads, the maintenance standards, and so forth. People understood, I think, because certainly struck us that they understood, people understood that roads are not an RDCO function. People also understood, however, that RDCO or regional districts tend to play an important role in being advocates for their electoral areas in approaching Ministry of Transportation and really pushing cases on behalf of their electoral areas. And I think that the concern that came forward was less about the RDCO is not doing its job in providing services because it's not a service, and more about the RDCO could be better at advocacy in that respect on this particular service. Yeah, let me just say a few more points here and then we'll come back. Fire protection identified as a service of significant concern. So we did hear about the fact that we don't have a full-time chief right now. We heard about the concerns about the lack of generators. We heard about just a sense of unease about, are we ready for the fire season? And there's not a lot of confidence that we are. That was as the committee knows, that was a big concern that was raised. Fringe area planning agreements, somewhat unique to RDCO, and those were also identified as a concern and giving the municipalities more of a say over areas. Now, it should be mentioned that Northwest Side is not actually part of a fringe area planning decision or area, but that still, your Central Okanagan West is, of course. And then finally, transparency around some costs were what was flagged as a concern as well. So transparency, we always want to have transparency maximized where we can, because that then kind of gives us a sense of confidence in the governing body. And so that was identified as a concern. Let me pause there, Mr. Chair. We're happy to kind of comment further on any of these concerns before we go into the committee's concerns or answer any questions, but I'll pause there and I'll let you see if there's any questions or input at this point.
Just one comment, and that is, our showings here, I think, were a lot smaller. There's a lot more conversation out in the community based on perception, there's been no change since 2017 government services study. Say, why would it bother? We went through this 5 years ago and nothing's changed. That's the perception.
Yeah.
And so there's an awful lot of that. But a lot of anger at the same time. Really serious issues. Approaching fire, fire systems, backup generators. Set loss of 75 homes last year. So there's a lot of people that are very upset.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And that's, and as you mentioned, that can be a very logical explanation for a lower turnout then, if there's that discussion going on in the community.
Anyway, there is. We need to take the number off.
Yeah, I know. Some would prefer. You mentioned cooperation with the Federation. That's between the actors in that.
Yes.
When you have a majority, don't have to. And quite frankly, majority doesn't really. As you pointed out, we're a very insignificant portion of the total, except correct me if I'm wrong, this fire departments for the EAs. Is that
Yes.
By our area.
Yep.
By
okay?
our area.
And so people employed by TEAs.
Well,
They're employed by the regional districts with money from the EAs.
Sure.
Who have no say.
yes. Well, they have some say, but yes, I understand your point.
They
Yes.
have no effective voice. That's effective. They can say what they want. They don't listen. Then you also have water. Again, systems are administered by the RTCO. The employees are in the RTCO office.
Yeah.
Not in the extra 30% cost to come out here to fix fire trucks for the county. That's another thing. Water, we sometimes have 2 or 3 trucks out for the systems on the side and sit down by the beach. I've told many times. And there's no accountability for operations in those departments to the electoral areas. Nor is there any accounting for the capital reserves that should be there. And in the past, perhaps because it's not clear.
Part of the agenda, there was operation and capital operating costs in the agenda that we should discuss.
Sure.
There's reserves there that are going somewhere with cash. And a solution assets are going somewhere to another pool, I don't know where, but it's a question I have.
Sure. Okay.
It's the transparency.
Well, yeah, no, and that's a legitimate concern. And I will mention as well, just in response to Daryl's concern, if I could just comment on, you've raised a very good point about the windshield time, as we call it, the employees driving over from one jurisdiction to the other. And I did mean to mention that as one of the concerns we heard. So thank you for raising that. Yeah.
We had a get together, and there was the parks department truck, employees on Saturday.
Yeah.
Checked the wash, and told us we must have used it all. I'm sorry, but it wasn't punished by expired, or there wasn't enough for the long time that it's been there. But they came out, checked that, to see what was going on. Time and a half, travel time, back.
Lots of comments.
Yeah.
And I,
Sometimes
No, they just pointed out there was none there. And, you know, the community members' attention was to me, figured that perhaps the contractor hadn't been there because he actually did something. That's the same as with bags, dogs, and different things. It can happen. But to have somebody with paid time and a half, check. And I heard this from quite a few people about the water trucks, spark truck. It's just continues on. And again, I've asked for accountability of the water. For a long time. Nothing on the operations. And there's going to be some financial information brought forward to me. I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be great, as the chairman.
I just want, I have one other comment to make here. And it's about the denomination and voting. We always talk about Kelowna, but really, when we talk about Kelowna, we need to look at Greater Kelowna, which is West Kelowna, Lake Country, and Beachland. Because really, those groups all have the same interests. So we have, what, 11 instead of 11 of the 13 votes that are really focused on the Greater Kelowna area. So even with the changes that we've got right now, one steps back, the municipal council effectively steps back 6 votes.
Yeah.
Still controls.
Yeah.
I have to take that first.
Yeah, I think that it's fair to say that the 4 municipalities have their interests may align more frequently because they're all incorporated areas. And so they have different needs from the regional district than the electoral areas. I'm not sure it's fair to say that they have the same interests all the time, but I understand your point that difference between the municipalities and the unincorporated areas.
I think there's a closer working relationship.
Yeah.
And
More in common, perhaps.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Much more. They
Yeah.
have their own departments of engineering.
Yeah.
Of water.
Mhm.
Well, rural areas are dependent on the urban still.
So if I just comment first, yes, I'd like to get the plan at some point in time. What total budget is for RC and what more is considered. So if we're 2 million people. What's their total operating budget? That's for future, if you have off the top of your head. Is their transfer.
Yeah.
So I have to be there 3 weeks ago. Approximately. And a dump truck full of wood chips, stumps, leaves, goes past the transfer station. And comes back empty 5 minutes later.
You mean up the hill?
Yes. So it just happens there's 2 young ladies from the regional district inspecting the transfer station. And the second one. That's it. I don't think they're supposed to be on the ground. Because when you try to clean, the first one, the second one, they're not there. Fresh, green, pine trees, stumps, roots, shoots, leaves. And this is one of the major problems we had last year with the fire.
They dumped it in the event of it.
Yes, they did. So I told these 2 regional district boys, I said, you should take it to up there and talk to the council, that's not our responsibility. He says, maybe you should go and call up the highways or whoever it is. I said, well, I do have a little bit of a relationship with the highways. A lot of contractors. I said, well, I can do that. But I said, can you possibly go out there and just for credibility, so that I'm not biased, just confirm that they dumped the stuff out there and maybe talk to the driver to see who he is. Even though the name's inside the board, that's quite a bit. So they go up there and one truck makes it. Not stop for them, so they come back. Well, he wouldn't stop. I said, can you take pictures of the door? take pictures of the truck driver? No. You can take pictures of the two loads of crap that, no. So this really in theory. So I made some inquiries, and no, you're not allowed.
No.
Okay. And why are we paying two people to come up here and inspect the transfer station? And they can't even take 5 minutes out to document illegal dumping. And we put signs up there, we've all gone up there and picked up garbage. I picked up garbage off my road in the springtime, it's all clean. And there's no recourse. I still haven't heard it back. This
Every
farm-
meeting.
He's quite long. And he's within 5 yards. You know how
Nothing to
he
me.
is? Yeah. So, I mean, this is an absolute crap. My. And, you know, from what I've talked through, or you read through, 90% of this is stacked. It doesn't matter where we, the cost of it is set.
Mhm.
The only thing we might have is a little bit of spending in the next 10 years. The fire department wants to do.
Yeah.
But basically, we've got maybe about $115,000, $120,000 of discretionary spending.
Yeah.
That doesn't even pay for one employee. With the overhead. I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
But $250,000 per employee, regional district, so the cost, average cost budget per employee is $500,000 now.
I don't think it's good. I don't think it's either of those, but anyway, it depends on who it is.
Is it higher or lower, Al? I mean, you can do this for.
Yeah,
what,
it's
25,
gonna be
30
lower than that. Yeah, the average for the cost for, yeah.
How many employees do you have in the regional district? And what's?
Are you talking about the total budget divided by number of employees? Oh, yeah, that's, yeah, but the budget includes a lot more than just labor costs.
I mean, it's almost
Yeah.
more fairly large companies.
Yeah.
Stuff that we all use every day. There's a rule of thumb, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars per
Okay.
across.
And the way
That's,
we just released, they call them SOFIs, which is the annual release of anybody over 70,000. Anybody that makes more than $70,000 at the regional district, their name will show up on that list with how much they made and their expenses.
no, wait, I guess I don't care how much we have to pay somebody. When I look at a project for public trade, you've got so many employees in public. Okay? And tell you what you should call. There's a tire company. Right now, their average is $500,000 per employee. Okay? That's what their revenues are. So they're $1.5 billion company. And it's got 3,200 employees. $500,000 per employee. The red book, does that still come out from regional?
No, they don't have that anymore. Yeah, I know what you're talking about though.
So
Yeah.
the red book used to be a pretty good report card
Yes.
with the UBCM.
Yep.
Upgrading all the municipalities and towns and everything else. And how much money they could borrow.
Yeah.
And what their, what their assets were.
Yeah.
And it was just like any other household.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, this is how to evaluate, in my opinion,
Mhm.
what we can and can't do.
Mhm.
And, you know, $2.3 million, we don't have a lot. 9% of it can't touch.
Mhm.
We don't have very much. But I think there's got to be more accountability on. You can't just subcontract every other employee, but subcontract. Park center.
Yeah.
At the transfer station, everything else employee. The private contract.
Yeah.
There's got to be some accountability from down there. Do your due diligence, and I mean, why are we subcontracting stuff out? Create an empire? And I mean, UBCM, they're great at creating empires, and when one figures out how to do it, they share it with the rest of them, and it becomes standard fare in the whole province here. So that's my.
Okay. That-
And I, you know, I'm not trying to get.
Oh, this, yeah.
But I mean, that there is so blatant. And after the fires of last year, which if the wind would have blown for another 5 years, I would not have a house. Right now, I'm having to negotiate with my insurance company for insurance on my house. And I tell you, it's not a fun thing to do. If they start doing their due diligence, you know, if something happens right now, like the doctor comes up, no fire. Fire manager's on holidays for 6 weeks or whatever. Who knows? Do you think I'm gonna get paid out of my house, like all these poor guys over here at Eskimo, in the next 2 or 3 years? Do you think they can afford lawyers to go sue insurance companies? I can't. I'm sure they can. I mean, these are services that are essential to this community. Fire department, Wayne's done a hell of a job over the last 20 years. They want the doctor. I mean, it seems that there's control from the regional district across the board for every private or probably every volunteer fire department in the province has been put under the thumb of these regional districts. And it's our way or no way. And this isn't the way we're going to do it. UBCM and all these regional districts have to start realizing that somebody pays their paycheck. And I don't think they understand that. They figure it's just we are immune from any responsibility or accountability. And especially after that one incident that dumped our things. Very I pass.
So I come from a very interesting perspective here, which I'm sure all of you have recognized, being myself, in that I do not come with a lot of the visceral emotion that the rest of you. I can totally, and it's visceral, like you can feel it in the room. So in a way, sometimes I think that maybe my brain works a little differently because I don't have that emotion to some of these situations. So the thing at the transfer station, infuriating. Except I wonder, is that an RDCO problem or an employee problem? So it probably wasn't these employers who were there to inspect the transfer station. You know, illegal dumping is a bylaw issue. I'm assuming they were bylaw officers that were there. Probably wasn't their job. Could they have gone above and beyond outside of the scope of their job and been a good employee? And if they had to do, they probably could, but I don't see that as an RDCO issue. I see that just as an employee person issue, and it could have happened if it was employees from the RDNO that made the decision like, hey, you know, not my pig, not my farm, I don't have anything to do that. So that would be my thing on that. Shady, I would have been angry too, and I said, but.
So, Carrie, who's responsibility when you see illegal dumping that endangered my house and our.
So
Who is going to stand up and say that guy should be fined? And
I think there's a
I don't think
process.
I'm the one to report it. I'm the one to
Yes.
sit.
You-
And why do we judge the jury? No.
No, but
There's a process involved.
there is a
process
process.
involved. But keep people from the regional district, smuggling who are.
Have people step up and stuff.
Canada. Okay, you
You're
report
gonna,
it.
you're gonna send people from Toronto out here, then that's.
I know, but all I'm saying is that I'm saying we need to almost state and realize that, is this really those two employees and their lack of dealing with the issue? Is that because they were RDCO and not RDNO, or was it just because of who they were?
Confident. A 2-hour drive out here, sit in the corner, put in an hour of transportation. Our subcontractors have the waste transfer do an unbelievable job. So it is not their fault or their fault. They are bridled and saddled. Like we don't just say nothing, do nothing, not complain, not to do anything at all. It's in their contract, subcontractor contract. They're not going to do anything.
Okay, so let's
It's
just
the
put that.
regional district's responsibility, and they're the ones that control the area.
So then I think, but what I'm saying is that then there would be a process. You go and you report the illegal dumping, and then I would call the employees out. Like, I just, of the RDCO, like they have bosses too. So that's the whole point I'm saying is that I'm just, so I have a few points, but that's one of them. And we can, you know, we can agree to disagree on what would have been the proper process and who should have responsibility to deal with that. I understand small town and that everyone needs to take responsibility, but
What used to happen, somebody, they saw somebody driving up to their dumpster at the pit, they would confront them. That doesn't happen. That's restricted.
I would expect that they would be restricted because it's not their job and if shit is banned, then they'll be saying like, why are you confronting people with illegal dumping when they have already showed us that? Like, we have to remember, people need to function in what their authority is as an employee. As an employee, you have a certain authority to do different things. Some people are very comfortable acting outside of that authority. Some people aren't comfortable acting outside of that authority. So that's all what I'm saying is that maybe these two, I don't even know who they are. I don't know. I'm just kind of trying to look at, I'm just trying to look at the others. Not give them plausible deniability, but have everyone maybe take a step back and think like it wasn't an RDCO issue.
No,
Like
and
maybe it's not an RDCO
it
issue.
isn't because that actually is forestry reserve land. So the RDCO has no authority there except at the transfer site. And up top where the old dump site is, because they still hold control of that. This is Canada, and Canada with a situation like that, you record, you report, and conservation are the ones that would go over and take care of that. And that's their job. And they would come out of the North Okanagan region.
I agree. 100%. But there was a sign up there saying the road is closed. Okay.
Who put that sign up?
Oh, you're not allowed.
No,
That's right, they closed the backcountry now because of fire. That's BC Forest, they have enforcement officers.
So
And you know, some
nobody, so
people would-
nobody's supposed to be past the dump. That's it. And so here we've got two people that work for the regional veteran.
What's their job? That's my question.
Well,
Who
why-
are they
why
and what's
are
their
you-
job?
I'm looking for that. Or pursue it. And find out who these two people are that come.
Well, I'm not gonna do that because I wasn't there and see it. I'm just
And
trying to.
we need to find out who they are. And find out what their job description is. And what they
I'm
do.
just saying that that's just.
My opinion, a little bit more to the job of the school employees. Especially now.
But I'm not.
And it seems
I
to
think
be this.
everyone has a very preconceived, I think that there's really a lack of, like, I think one of the questions I was gonna bring up, no, bring it up.
Please.
So, one of the things, sometimes I lay nights, lay in bed awake and anything. And, one of the things that I find extremely frustrating for me as a newbie is the lack of response or the lack of this process, how it's been set up, that we can say a lot about the RDCO, what they're doing, what they're not doing, what's happening, what's not happening, we tried this is what happened. But the RDCO is never here to be like, hey, that's not true, or yes, we did try that. And this, so it seems very one-sided to me. To me, that's extremely frustrating. So I would love if there was someone here from the RDCO where I could say like, hey, what's going on with this fire chief? Like, there's all these, everyone has an opinion as to why the fire chief isn't getting hired, but really, what's the RDCO's opinion? I'm not saying their opinion is going, or what they say was is going to be accurate or not accurate, more accurate than what you have to say, or you have to say, or you have to say, but it would sure be nice to get a fulsome understanding of what's going on. So for me, that's extremely frustrating. I have a really hard time buying into anything when I feel like I'm only getting one side of everything. So,
This is the deputy CAO of the regional district sitting here. Adam Harvey.
Well, yeah, and I
I
think,
saw like Adam, you know, she's never sitting at the table. Like,
yeah,
you sit at the table, there's never anyone here, it's like, they ask the question, like, so why is it, what's, like, is all the verbiage that's going on here about the fire chief always getting run out, and which is some of the comments that have been
Yeah.
said here in these meetings, is that accurate, or from the RDCO's position, what's going on with that? And we just never have that. So-
Yeah. And I think that, and I think, and your comment about the process, I think is a fair comment. I think we followed the process kind of set out by the province on this stuff. So I think it's RDCO staff aren't here at the committee table to respond to everything and defend against everything. But I think what the committee can take away from some of the comments it's heard, and even some of the comments that individual members are making, is that, okay, an issue clearly that we're hearing is on responsiveness, on transparency, on those kinds of things. So, that's something that we need to take back and say that is or that we as a committee, you as a committee have to say, okay, that's kind of something that we're hearing. That's something that we're feeling. How can we address that? Is it a matter of saying we want more, and we'll talk about some of these options in a bit. Is it a matter of saying we want more touch points with the RDCO at regular point intervals so we get explanations about these things? We want more town hall meetings. We want more process. All those kinds of things are very legitimate concerns and very legitimate asks. And this process can help bring those forward and get those solutions. So yes, the process is very much focused on what's in place right now. What are the concerns that we have with that? And now the next phase will be, okay, or the next point will be, how do we then address those concerns? Because clearly they're not being addressed.
So just a little bit of background too. Didn't the association, who started it?
The Northwest Side Great Cares,
Yes.
were the ones that established it and fundraised for the original.
Yes, and I'm knocked on doors and solo memberships and
It is a function of the regional district.
so, and we ran it for like $20 a year, $40 a year.
Can't remember.
I was sort of involved, so I,
Yeah.
and it was basically we fundraised and paid for everything up there and turned it over to the regional district. And now we get charged 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, but we have to be part of the system because it's not good enough to
Well,
just
I
take
know,
the garbage
I know,
up there. We have to
I
be
know,
part of
but
it.
back then, it's when we were 4 or 5 people.
Yeah.
So the process is somebody's gotta go, we talk to you as our representative. You talk to the regional. So if the regional district is gonna come out here and basically say it's not our responsibility, we're not, they should be able to talk to someone who is the responsibility. For me to go to the highways or the forestry to figure out who's doing illegal dumping there, when you've got credible government or some form of government that passes up the line to somebody who can take care of it. That's what I would expect.
There's an issue between operations and representation.
And I know, also give us a process. You know, if the regional district is going to deal with your stuff, tell us who we contact.
So really, I think there's an issue with the regional district. They limit our representative and also being involved in operations to step in.
And for the transfer site, we talked to engineering regional district. It's operated through there, and there is a waste transfer office with girls work.
Trying to get somebody to come up here.
Try to have it based on, it's almost impossible.
Mhm. And that's a legitimate concern. I think it's, I don't think you're going to find in no regional district that I know of certainly kind of has a situation where the electoral area director is given an elevated role in operations. That once we get into a local government, and as Wayne pointed out, these services need to be part of a broader system. And actually, when it comes to solid waste, it is a mandated service under the provincial legislation. So we are part of this broader system. The way that the system here and the system in any regional district is going to work is that when you have local government involved, you're going to have certain expectations. You're going to have certain rules for employees. Can there be improvements in communication? Can there be improvements in accountability and transparency? Very likely. And so that's all legit for us to bring on the table, but it's not reasonable to kind of bring to the table that we need to turn the clock back so we can do this at $20 again and get rid of the regional district.
Alan, don't put words in my mouth. I'm
Okay.
saying, we started the process, we did it, we turned it over.
Yep.
We have an expectation that waste from a building lot down Esteban
Yes.
is being dumped in the bush. That's not, that's a.
Are you
building-
talking at the transfer site with the concrete? Is
No,
that's
no,
an
no.
arranged deal?
No, I'm talking with fruit sheets, lumps,
Okay.
some seeds.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a bylaw in place somewhere that says you can't take root shoots, logs.
There is. Have it up
Yeah.
right here.
So somebody in the regional district should be responsible for that. If there's a building permit down there, they have some teeth to say, hey, this came from that site on this day.
Yeah,
We
no,
got dumped up there on this day at this site, and we got a picture of it.
Yeah.
And you would expect somebody at the regional district to say, connect the dots, not me.
Yeah.
Because you know what, I don't get paid to do this. You get paid a lot to do this. Everybody here gets paid. It's not.
Getting sidetracked.
No, I hear you, but this seems to be endemic to other issues here.
Yes, we're gonna get into that. We haven't talked about our observations.
We carry that.
Yeah, share your point and.
I think my only other thing was the consultant's observation of like the dominance of the city of Kelowna and the voting. And then I guess my question would be, like the overall question would be like, okay, that came up. So how do we mitigate that issue with the, in the current structure? But then I had a question, and again, this would be one that maybe the representative from RCO can answer. Because I know we've talked about one way to mitigate that dominance is through these committees.
Yep.
Like,
sure, you're right, yeah.
But as I understand it from Wayne, that committee was ex-committee, like that committee was not gonna be allowed. Or yes, is that what
Yeah.
it's called?
I've asked for it several times and
Yeah, so I guess if what we've heard from you is that that's a way to mitigate, and that's how other regional districts deal with this dominance in
Yeah.
certain areas. Why, so then, of course, I have the question, why does the RDCO say no
Yeah.
to it?
Yeah.
So I guess that would be.
Yeah.
You know, if we recommend, like, hey, we need to have an electoral area, one of the formal recommendations from the report is that we should create this committee, but the RDCO has already said no a few times. So what is the rationale behind that? And does the recommendation even make sense if they have rationale and why it can't happen?
Yeah, and yeah, no, that's good point. Yes, good point. And I mean, I can speak to that if you wish, but okay, I didn't know if you want, okay.
No, I'm so kind of.
No, I didn't know, but I didn't know if you wanted me to speak to it. I didn't know if you wanted me to speak to it or if it was.
You can answer, but that's sort of my thing, like, there's
Yeah.
no point making a formal recommendation.
Understood.
It's already been tried, and there's
Yes.
legitimate reasons why it can't happen, and we don't know.
Yes. So maybe I can answer it this way. My sense is when we look at the establishment of those standing committees, the Local Government Act, which is the governing legislation for the regional district and all regional districts, specifies very clearly that it is the role and the authority solely of the chair of the regional district, of the chair of the board to determine what committees to, standing committees to create and to establish those. So it's the prerogative of the chair, it's the authority of the chair. In past years, past chairs, for whatever reason, on whatever advice or on whatever thoughts, have decided not to have that committee. My understanding from the current chair is that there is now a movement towards moving towards that committee. So there is a change. I know the regional district from discussions at the political level, from discussions at the staff level. The regional district is, keep in mind too, the regional district got behind this study and recommended this study to the province, and the province responded with funding for the study. So that tells me that there is a genuine willingness to hear these kinds of recommendations coming forward. In the past, that may not have been the case.
Or is it just vacation?
We'll find out. But Dwayne, this kind of process where the province is involved at the table, I know our representative's not here this evening, but at the table where the minister will want to see the report and what comes out of this, that shines a pretty big spotlight on this stuff. A spotlight that has not been in past studies, frankly. So.
I'll just. Okay.
Just an observation, listening to what you're saying. What people are frustrated. People feel that they're not being listened to, that their concerns are not being addressed, that they're seeing that they just feel that when they do have any meetings or confrontations with RDCO staff, that they don't feel that their concerns are being addressed at the time. I think these are all symptoms of the sort of general frustration with the RDCO. I understand when, and also Daryl, I understand that when you have a situation like we've had, it's frustrating. The only people that you're dealing with are people from the RDCO. It may not be their job to do what you're asking them to do, but at the same time, you just want some recognition and someone to say something, rather than just say, it's not my job and walk away.
Some of them was the job.
Yeah, I understand that, but these are all symptoms of the frustration within the community in dealing with the regional district. So I think we can get bogged down with talking about individual situations and frustrations. They are legitimate and should be heard, but I think we have to look at the larger picture and say, these are all frustrations that people are feeling ignored, people are concerned about fire safety, they feel that they ignored in regards to fire safety. I mean, I think the general attitude with this committee, as well as for a lot of the members of the community that I speak with, is that they just given up. They just feel nobody cares. Why, what's the point? Why should I come to another meeting when nobody's going to do anything? Because we've had meetings for years and nothing's ever changed, nothing's ever happened. So there's a real feeling that that we're not taken seriously. Whether we will be taken, we have this governance study, we make the recommendations, will this be taken seriously? That remains to be seen. But the general attitude is we won't be taken seriously. We won't be listened to. We will just go through the motions once again, and nothing will happen. And that is the happy thing. That's why people don't show up for meetings, because they've been through it before, nothing happened. So, and the frustrations with people dumping. I mean, somebody's dumping, you can report that.
Yeah.
There is someone who should come out and look at that. And if you know who dumped it, you can say who dumped it. I mean, I had a neighbor who was frustrated with my dogs. Who actually on a leash, but they were still frustrated with my dogs. And they're big dogs, they're cute. But at the same time, they had no problem sending out a couple of dog patrol officers to come up and talk to me at my house and say, what's going on with these dogs that are running loose? And I said, well, they don't run loose. I don't know what you're talking about. It was a frustrated neighbor who was frustrated with everything else that's going on around them, the house burning down, everything else. I get that. But they came out to see me and they, cost me $200, in license fees, which, I'm happy to pay because I should have my dog's license anyway. But it's that, these are the interactions that people have with the RDCO.
Sure.
It's never positive. It's always
Yeah.
negative.
Good point.
And so that's where people have this general apathetic confrontational attitude. And all
I just have a factual observation. Motion, please.
I can tell by the way.
Relax, open. Touchy for years.
As long as they're not alternative facts.
What, the PAs,
Yeah.
what percentage of the overall budget are we,
Yes.
or what fraction of 1%? Is it 1% or less?
It's likely small, yes.
Okay, so when you have board of directors sitting down to discuss major things that affect all municipalities, and you have an electoral area representative or two who bring up concerns about this smallest flea on the biggest backside of the biggest elephant ever. You don't see it because their focus is on their major concerns. And we're honest, if we were those representatives, they don't have such a charge. They're little itty bitty.
You can't blame them.
So this is.
Yeah.
You just can't blame them, it's just, we're totally wrong in this circumstance.
So maybe
Find
we should
ourselves in.
be,
And that-
play on an elephant, maybe we should just be a cat.
That would be nice. But that's what creates all the frustration.
Yeah, I
The
understand.
reality is, we're too insignificant. And the only time we can voice our concerns, committees, or meetings, get-togethers, when we're beaten down.
Yeah.
I remember the open house the regional district did for the water rates. And we were going to get magnificent volume of water for a limited money. That's called bait switch. Because within a year, 6 months it changed, a year it changed, and the rates went up and the volume of water went down.
300% increases.
And and again, operations, capital,
Yeah.
reserves, accountability, please. I'm sorry, is somebody speaking? I can't hear anything.
I'm sure everyone can hear Wayne.
I'm sure that they don't want to. I've been at, I just, is that job, we should have had because she's never had a chance to perform. But
So-
I've seen them.
Yeah.
Just ignore, vote that. Not even listen, or listen and then go on with what they're going to do. And they should be listening today, especially on concerns, of the community, especially on accountability, transparency, and everything else. But again, the reality is, they've got the bigger concerns of their constituents. We are not their constituents. They're part of this great whole. And regional directors have always been Kelowna County. Love the job.
The chairs, you mean, the regional chairs? Yeah.
A regional chair, yeah. It's a nice little chair.
So,
Anyways,
So electoral districts really do not fit.
we do not fit, we
Yeah.
do not count in
Yeah.
current
Just
circumstances.
all.
Yeah. well, and I think, and I don't mean to interrupt the flow of events here, but just, I think Daryl's comments deserve a little bit of response, and just to kind of, I'm going to borrow on Eric's very articulate observations and kind of summary of the frustration, because it is, when we look at water system as an example that was raised, so I live in the city of Kelowna. Last year, we were informed that we were going to be having like major water increases rates, not just rates, but the capital. So we're paying significantly more than we had been before, because the city has had to undertake a lot of work to get up to the drinking water standards and all that. And everybody's facing that issue. The difference is and this goes back to Eric's comment, I think my relationships, the difference if I can kind of infer from what we're hearing, my relationship with the city, I interact with the city regularly, and most of it is very positive. And so there isn't that level of frustration going into that issue. And so when that issue hits, I tend to kind of give the benefit of the doubt, try to find, I'm informed as to what's going on. There's transparency, there's accountability, and it's okay. But when you're in a situation where people feel, to Eric's point, frustrated, and people feel that there's no trust, then that makes it very difficult to kind of get that sense of transparency, that level of accountability that you want. So
There's no need, is what I'm saying, with the fleet.
well, yeah, I understand your point. It's just you're saying it's a nuisance. Let's just ignore it. Yeah,
Just an irritant.
I hear you. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, all right.
He just called you an irritant, just saying.
I need to address some of this because it will just on Daryl was back a little while about the dominance at the board. It isn't completely municipalities against elected areas. And we get a lot of support out of Peachland and Lake Country, for instance. Stephen Johnson out of West Kelowna has come to support electoral area issues. Charlie Hodge, Brad Stephen, people like that have come forward and they've supported us. So the problem is the tie is a loss, and they got just enough votes that they can make things things go that way. Kelowna, you know, sort of get this focused on them because they've held the chair for, I believe it's 57 out of 58 years, chair's position being there. So as Alan said, the chair determines who sits on all the different committees and the rest of that. So it makes it really tough to try and get in there, but we do get good support from other members of the board. It's just not enough, right? Which is frustrating, and I heard that word a number of times. That's what I heard when I knocked on doors and elections and the rest of that. I heard a very frustrated community, but it's not just the Northwest Side. I have the same level of frustration at Brent Road, which is a community 4 kilometers south of Beachland. They're part of the electoral area, about 65 homes along the waterfront. And yeah, they got all sorts of serious issues. They call themselves the forgotten people. So it's not just the Northwest Side. Again, Trepanier has issues. Bear Creek, Maine, or Bear Creek Road have issues. These are communities where you don't even have a fire department. You live in Trepanier and your house catches on fire. You're standing in your front yard watching your house burn. And they're right between 2 municipalities with fire departments. So there's issues like that throughout the electoral area. This is the issue with the Northwest Side. A lot of us have Vernon phone numbers, we've got Vernon addresses. We spend a lot of time in Vernon. We use the services in Vernon, the services that are applied to our community and provided to our community by the province of Vernon. These aren't decisions that our regional district makes or we make. This is, we're looking at a line that was drawn on a map in 1965. And here we are, the first time in human history that a line on a map has caused a problem. Right? So we're going to look at it, we'll see what we can come up with, and then see how it works. But our regional district is evolving. It's like Vancouver. Regional districts originally back in the 60s, who were there to provide services to small rural communities, fire departments, water systems, stuff like that, right? And as the densification and the urbanization and all the rest of that grows, then they start focusing on other things, and that's what's happened in Central Okanagan Regional District. They're focused on regional parks and dog control and things that suit the overall majority. And yeah, the local government aspect of this regional district is in the rearview mirror, and we're sort of bringing it up and to light a little bit to them. But it's going to be the recommendations that this committee makes. It's going to go to the regional board, and that's what we're going to figure out whether or not this is a step on a path, or go and try and find a solution. But like I said, the electoral area committee could still be under consideration, but nothing positive has happened on that. And the other thing that Alan brought up in a prior meeting was them just addressing our stakeholder voting rights in a different light, and they weren't prepared to do that. So this is why we're here. But they don't all need it.
Well, I can say that. I was saying that they had no need to pay attention to it.
Eastern and Lake Country probably have almost as much in common with us as we do, because they're not 140,000 people like Kelowna, and the Lake Country's growing, they're growing fast.
If I can just make a comment. The gentrification of our community.
Which
The gentrification of our community here. That leads us all far to being displaced by. People. Who have come from other areas, and in the past, we wrote, if we had a problem, our little section down there wrote a check. And we all contributed to the community, no matter what. If we weren't getting paid, you still did what was right for your community.
You're talking about the glory days of the waterfront. We have inland growth now, we're a community.
So,
That's changed somewhat.
like this is where, yes, we're moving up. But the services that are being provided by the regional district, and no disrespect, I think this is just an economic. This is economically beneficial to the government rather than address the real problems. It's just the way it is. And being from the private sector, I mean, the only thing I really care about out here, and I've been out here for over 50 years, road, garbage and fire.
Or these families.
Police.
Yeah.
Oh, water, I suck.
He brought us to the lake.
Like, that's
That's your
that's
next
different
decision.
taxes.
Drawing from the lake,
So you get.
drawing from the lake will end in the not too distant future. Fish habitat.
Let's see what happens. So, from a selfish point of view, usually I just write the check. I can't write the check with transportation, I can't write the check with, well, we did write a check. We did a pretty good job. And what else? Roads, I can affect the roads a little bit, but no. I can't really affect the roads. So what are we left with? I mean, this is where I'm frustrated. I used to make things happen. I get called to do the stuff, we make it happen. And I don't recognize this.
Not government. Working out.
So, I understand your perspective, but this is what the bulk of us are.
I think this is our opportunity to.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that will by the horse. This isn't gonna work there. Maybe we look out there.
It does work there. I can still like information.
Oh, absolutely.
I
This
like
is the
all
most
the
information we've got in 20 years. Thanks, Alan. I mean, Dick, hard numbers. Wayne couldn't even get this stuff. The hard numbers and all the stuff, the budgets, the hard numbers.
The full regional district budget is posted on their website. Go to the last meeting in March.
It's getting the details.
Oh, well, yeah, the deep dive.
Sorry, I still have a hard time to get our agenda. But,
Yeah, you go ahead. We're into that part now.
Do you have that on?
No, I can put it on screen if you like.
Do that.
Okay, yeah, give me a second. Give me just a second. What have I got that? Okay. Okay, I need 2 minutes, maybe take a 2-minute break.
Sure.
And I'll, where's my magic here?
it's an issue, you have a measure. You're gonna have- So, I mean, sorry. This is culture.
So I'm sure the bylaws about probability, I think we're good.
Because the industry going up there like that. That's why you can't say.
Get it?
Well, yeah, I've got it, but I don't know. All right, dude.
Same time. Actually,
Next time you talk to me.
Yes. Pull down here. Pull as we go.
Oh.
Use the down, oh, I say the arrow.
All right.
We've already kind of killed it.
I know. Okay, want me to move on?
It's down arrow.
Guys, you wanna-
Okay, that's it. I'll have to move. I'll just scroll it down as we go. So do you want to just, how do you want to read it out or do you want to just focus? Right? Okay.
Guys, can we get back to? You wanna do one?
I can read.
There we go. Oh, we fit it all in there. Okay, that's the whole issue on there.
12 points we wanted to discuss. The first point is really about voter advocacy and, not seeing differences in. So we're starting with issue number 2. And we want to just,
Well, it's actually not it's this. So this is, I can make it smaller. Yeah, but this is the whole issue on there. So that's the whole fire services issue on there.
Okay, that was the second.
Well, I mean, I can just summarize and just, the two issues really are, we have no fire chief that can go into the fire season, which is totally unacceptable, and the fires are just starting to get spoiled. The local fire chief position is in the revolving door with the current RMCO fire management. And we require, getting, Vancouver urban firefighters, jumping in here as a fire chief and reporting to the fire services. And it just has not worked. It's been a rotating door for what, 6, 7, 8 years now. And we don't have anybody that's got on the ground, local knowledge, where do the guys go to start the campfires and the parties in that area. What wildfire experience have we had? None. Probably. How much experience do we have know, it takes- but we're not getting the right people. And we've got a revolving door, so right now we have a situation where people don't even want to come forward for the job because they know it might last more than 8 months or a year. Suspended. Yeah, they get suspended with the code. So this whole relationship with the fire service manager and deployment hasn't worked. It's got to change. Second comment is White Rock Lake Fire, destroyed 75 homes in the community. Following that fireboat was used instead of backup generators to fill fire trucks when the water cannons could actually see like short homes. We have some more resignations, no acceptance of responsibility from our state directors, engineering group, fire management group, or administration. Where the hell is the accountability? There are many families in our community that and nobody seems to want to talk about it. That's a major issue.
Just one point about the fireboat. It was just recently used down.
For fighting the Martin fire, I understand.
Right. It did proper purpose. And so it can be used for that, and it wasn't in our area.
Point to that, you admitted earlier about insurance company. My insurance company is questioning the vote and their participation prior to last year, and it might not get this. Wasn't being used. As Rob was saying, it's supposed to.
The problem is a year later, we still don't have generators. Where the hell where are the brains here? You know, we have no backup generators. We have power that comes in from one area, that's the wind across the lake, Winfield and north. And the first thing that burns is the power poles. So this is a known issue and has been known forever. And somebody their head needs to roll in from that for making the choice of not putting generators in. We should have generators today, and we don't. That's pure stupidity.
So I have a question of the White Rock Lake stuff. Do you know, Wade, if there's been a formal proposal or if there's anything in place to do a post-disaster review?
No, BC Forest Service determined that it was a naturally caused fire. They don't investigate naturally caused fires.
Okay, so that's BC Fire, but what about within the regional district? Has there ever been an official proposal to the regional district to do a post-disaster review on the whole of the regional district and how that's played out in the fires?
No, I believe the Thompson Nickel Regional District discussed it, but did not move forward with it.
But with the RDCO,
Our
there's been
ours-
no proposal to have that done? Is that something that you as our elected person can put a formal proposal in, that there be an official review of the fires and RDCO's roles in those, lack of what they did, what they could do better, what needs to change for next year,
Change that.
I think
or? You know what?
the Thompson Nickel and North Carolina Regional District tried to get BC Wildfire to do the review and they refused.
Yeah, but I'm not talking BC wildfires, because BC wildfires have been having, I'm trying to understand those, so BC wildfires have been having to do with generators or,
The only ones that would have any ability
that
to-
would have been RDCO, right? So that's my question, is there any, like, I guess my question is that at any time, has there been a request that a review be done and people get official answers as to these questions that have been going around the community for the last year, to get some official answers to
You
this?
know,
And is
focus
it-
on regional district actions. in
Yes,
fire.
because the RDCO refused, that's my question.
Association requested. And
Requested to the RDCO.
yes, so the community association requested an investigation to it and.
So there was an official request to the RDCO.
There was a letter from the community association. that went.
Good question.
Okay.
But
That's all I'm
why
saying.
bother doing it?
Well, because sometimes they can-
I understand doing it, and I would like it done. But from another perspective,
But I'm talking about specific within our community, so it wouldn't just be a fleet, because it could be focusing on our.
I agree, but it's not a macro issue to some people.
And it'd be difficult to do without all parties involved. You know, you'd need BC wildfire there, regional district there.
But our
police
question,
would
but I said,
run.
this question, we're specific to the RDC, why were the generators sitting there? Why were they not? Those were our questions,
So you're focused on generators.
and we were focused on what happened in the
And we're focused right now. Why has nothing been done in the last year?
Which is uncomfortable.
We have,
There's 75 plants that are out there. And a number of them would not be. If they hadn't done the job, and somebody didn't do their job, and there's been no responsibility to.
That sounds like a communication problem.
Accountability,
Maybe why they don't want to it, or maybe they.
there's an accountability issue.
Yeah.
It's not a communication.
Well, accountability,
Communication is done. Is everybody accountability?
Parking still could have done that without problem. Because of the number of homes lost.
Sure they
For
could.
the next one?
They could have done that.
Let's go to the next one, and know where we can go. We need to. So that's one thing that we resolve.
I do have a question about the report, the final report.
Yes.
So like this big concern, maybe you can help myself, talking on that, who doesn't understand. The big concern about the fire.
Yeah.
When the final report's done, it says one of the, I assume, that one of the concerns from the community is the fire response, the fire chief, the fire services, all the different,
Yeah.
parts of it. Then some of these things that the community, members of the community have requested, whether it's a review, whether
Yeah.
it's whatever, will that be put in as like a recommendation to be done, like the elephant in the room, this needs to be addressed? It's like, how does that play out kind of when, because I understand we're all discussing it here, but I'm wondering how it plays out when it comes to the final report and the recommendations that you make based on the community concern.
So, sure. So first of all, the report will be the committee's report. We'll provide the draft to the committee. The committee will look at that and make sure that it's comfortable with what's going forward. We'll make recommendations to the committee on what we think goes in there and how it's presented. And we'll write the report and help present it to the board. With respect to the suggestions that are brought forward now, that these kind, those suggestions are going to be brought back to this group. So that, for example, the suggestion, just to take the specific, that a postmortem, a review done on kind of what went wrong, what could have done better, all that kind of stuff, what could have done better. That will be brought forward here to this committee to say, okay, here was an option for change that was brought forward to try to address this concern, this legitimate concern around the fire service and the fact we're moving into fire season. It'll all be part of the public record. The committee then will determine, is this a change we want to identify as our recommendations going forward? But we'll certainly mention that as kind of, here's the full group of issues and concerns and possibilities that were raised.
And to address that, the fire board has authorized and is conducting a fire service review for the fire departments.
Yeah.
So that is underway now, and the chair and the vice chair have been working for about the last 4 or 5 months on this issue, because both myself and the other electoral area director brought it to them about 4 or 5 months ago now. And he tells me that he has been working with Tuesdays and Thursdays in the regional district, and he says it's Tuesdays and Thursdays in the full working on this problem. Unfortunately, we have achievements, but they are putting time and effort into it, is what I do.
Item 3 is the water cost, water system, generators, which more comments on. But I think maybe we should switch over and have a look at the agenda. We have the cost and report. Agenda documents, the cost and report.
Yeah. Yeah, I think.
Our water costs have gone up over 300% since. And that does not include the additional capital costs. So we've got like a 600% increase in the last 15 years in our cost of water, including the asset.
And this is one of the problems, Scott, too, is what was initially done, last funding for CDBG, right? These add-ons now, there's no grants for funding for CDBG. To facilitate, so we're paid for it all.
So that's what the water.
So we did get a $1.9 million grant for work in Killen Beach.
With the original or subsequent.
No, it was Canada something grant.
Yes.
But it was for the original, not any.
Came from the federal government, it was $1.9 million.
The original capital.
It was spent to do the work on Winchester and the piping.
About for anything that's a.
That's what I'm saying. Again, a whole system. We've got more senior funding for it. Now we're having to do the repairs and maintenance for it. And it's not going to be, this fact, it's not senior government funding, with grants and or wherever they can. We're not getting any extra money for the problem.
No, we haven't since that $1.9 million.
That's the problem.
I'm not sure what grants are available, how much advocacy there is on behalf of RDCO on behalf of areas for these, for these infrastructure improvements, frustration improvements. The other question I had was, we're building systems for 5,000 homes, and we have 300. And 2 of them within a mile of each other. Why aren't they tied together? Why, we've got groundwater coming out of Valley of the Sun. Again, how far apart is that? 3 miles. But, there's gotta be cheaper solutions than building these massive infrastructure projects for multi-million dollars that are designed for 15 times our homes.
We have a water infrastructure study underway now. It's supposed to be doing cost comparisons on some of the issues that you just brought. Hopefully we will be getting that study soon.
Okay.
And that will bring some answers to that aspect of it.
When I'm looking at the water revenue fund for the Killen system, I'm not sure what that one is.
I think everyone's got it in their package, right?
That is
Yeah.
on the agenda and second page of the budget report. What I'm really interested in, I see a transfer to capital facilities for $220,000 and an amortization expense of $130,602. And for these amortization expenses, I know it's a non-cash transaction to the account, and usually referring to the write-off or depreciation of the asset related. But as far as this water revenue fund, there should be an asset in the water revenue fund, it should be part of the capital fund. And there's another, go down another page or 2, there's a similar transportation amortization of $185,000, which would be where the amortization should be, depreciation of the water assets should be. At the same time, again, this is non-cash, so it means that this money should be moved from one fund to another. So in my mind, we've got $500,000.
So the TCA, so that's something that doesn't show up in the budget. My understanding is, so literally that's just showing you, because you'll see that the TCA also shows in the revenue. So the amount that shows in the revenue also shows on the expense side. Is literally an accounting standard for public service accounting standards that they have to record they amortize it over and they have to show the revenues showing, and it like literally you'll see both on. So it's not in
on the operational side.
Yeah.
where we have TCA expense of $130,000.
So there's two there. There's the 130,602, and just below it is the 54. And then if you look, the first line in the revenues is the 185. So literally all the it's like an accounting, they need to account because when the financial statements come out, they need to show the amortization. That's just literally how they need to account for it. It's an in and out. So the revenue.
This is going to other funds somewhere.
Yeah, no, I know. It's the first thing I was like, what? And it's the same if you're looking through the systems, if you look at, like why is the actual revenues that much higher than the budgeted value? It's literally, it's just the accounting showing for the, how they do their capital assets. Yeah, where is it? Yeah, no. It's an in and out, and it's, yes, when they acquire capital assets, they just need to show it across, so it doesn't, they don't show the revenues in 1 year when you got $1 million, and then it shows up as a deficit as they amortize it over the next 10 years. They show it coming in and out in the same year, so there's no deficit. It's literally just for sorry to say it.
But you
how
want
it
to
is,
tell
right?
me, did you got
Under the capital side, their distribution system, $190,000. That's page 2 of the capital fund.
Are we still on Killenny Beach?
Are we still in Killenny Beach?
Yeah.
Oh, distribution, yeah, so that was an expense on the distribution system.
Yes.
I don't know what it was.
Everything's just thrown into a pot and it's one line item. And it's just, it's all electricity, all the paper, all the chemicals. No.
Well, no, it's capital.
It would have to be a capital cost, yeah,
Not the capital cost.
yeah, not operations.
So that could be maintenance.
And
or-
no, not maintenance. It'd have to be like an upgrade or a extension or,
distribution system would be piping, wouldn't it?
yeah, often piping. Yeah, like
So there's
extra-
actually money spent on-
I would guess,
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
guess it was
capital
piping.
Like, did they go down a different, yeah, I don't know. Did they put in a bigger pipe? Did they extend to more houses? I don't know, but
Because all our chemical costs, labor costs, electrical costs.
That's all.
those are all in operations.
Oh, they also put that pressure relief valve in up there too.
That could be it.
Yeah,
So that
there
could
too.
be it. That's
That might be
capital.
it, that, I think that was a couple $100,000 for that. That might be the, yeah, that might be that.
Is that in 2020?
There's no footnote.
Back to the revenue fund.
Yeah, that's your operations.
Revenue fund. We have $40,000 there in salaries full time, I guess that was for maintenance, for testing and all of that kind of stuff.
Water testing.
Electricity, 21,000, 45,000. Travel, 14,000. That's just all the fuel and oil and government.
Yeah, but the gas and fuel, that's in a separate budget is usually, yeah, not associated, well, depends on how they do it, but usually the travel costs are your vehicle going to and from, coming to test, coming and that kind of travel cost. Whereas gas and fuel,
Basically the cost of on the.
We have a regional mechanic, so I mentioned his cost would probably be attached to that too.
I got the revenue side, we have administrative overhead of $24,000. That's a cost.
it is a cost, yeah.
That's an allocation.
They do show that, yeah, that's right. That's, and engineering overhead is shown separately. That's actually one of the things that we had noted even before this detail to just ask further questions because, yeah, those costs have gone, like, even though the budget has stayed the same, administrative overhead, and again, I'm not raising this, that it is a concern necessarily, but just when we go through this kind of stuff, one of the things that we're generally doing, I mean, I'm not going, office supplies, is that the right amount for office supply? I mean, why would I know? What I'm looking for when we go through is, have there been fluctuations in costs? And if so, then maybe that prompts a question on what is this one or why is this one? I'm not saying that there's no reason for it. I'm just saying it prompts the questions. So if there are questions that anyone has that we can look into and add to our list that you want us to look into, then that's fine. That's the kind of thing that, to me, this should highlight, because it's not super obvious to go, chlorine is up $5,000 bucks. Is that a good deal? I have no idea, right? But why is it 5,000 one year and 4,000 the next? Like, maybe that's what happened there. It just triggers questions. So if there are questions that the committee has, but the admin cost is one thing, because admin costs are going up, administration overhead, when your entire budget isn't. And often the admin allocation is based on a percentage of, or that type of thing. So if one is going up and the other isn't, then, did we hire an extra staff, or is this service taking up more time because of interior health requirements or whatever? Again, there might be a totally logical explanation. I'm just saying that's one of the things that we noticed.
I'm just looking at it, going to $30,000 on administration, $57,000. Almost $70,000 payroll, for some kind of costs. To test all.
Yep.
Find somebody on a part-time basis, contract.
Sure. Yeah.
That's where I was going to say, it's like 2.3 million of that. How many employees or how many partial employees cumulative are we getting? It's 2.3 million.
Right.
And since you come all right, like, how do you have any comparisons for other municipalities?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
No, that's a good point. So, if we go back to kind of the different phases of an overall study, one of the, typically like in an incorporation study, for example, and I know that we're not focusing on that, but in an incorporation study, we will, when we get to the next phase of that study, there'll be like more of a deep dive on, okay, how many employees exactly are allocated to this part of the regional district, and how does that compare to, what would it be like if we had a municipality? What can we anticipate? So if an option, and not to prejudge where the committee wishes to go, but if an option is to look at another jurisdiction, another regional district, then we would want to look at kind of what's the employee count here, what would it be in a different place, that kind of thing.
And again, one of the other options that we will speak to later this evening, but the idea of a service review, which has already sort of been initiated at the fire service level, but when you do a service review on water or on parks, you do sort of get down to this kind of detail. And how could we do this? Like, the whole point of a service review is, what are we doing and how could we do it differently? And would it be, what are the pros and cons of going with a contract model? Or, could we actually find someone who wanted to do, because other regional districts, do use a contractor that then services, because they have 8 water systems and they do all 8.
Well, I know, like,
Yeah, but-
if you've got a contractor, Wayne Watson, of course, takes care of his best one. I don't know why we couldn't have one of these guys do it ours.
Right.
And probably save ourselves $60,000 a year. And Empire. Oh, yes.
No, actually, that was the case 10 years ago, so I guess. Regional district had a contract employee who lived in West Shores.
Yeah.
And he had a regional district vehicle, and he did the water systems over here.
So what happened to that?
Okay.
What happened to that?
He moved his contract, and I'm not sure, I was part of that at the time, I'm not sure what happened, but he moved on, and the job became a regional district position.
Well, if we look at kind of, I know we're jumping around the agenda a little bit, but if we look at options, so And we kind of think, well, okay, well, if we're concerned about windshield time, if we're concerned about economies of scale and making sure we have somebody here if we do different things. RDOS, for example, if you go down to Naramata, they've got a satellite office there because to deal specifically with water. So they've kind of put a person out there because they know they have enough work out there to keep that person busy, and it makes sense economically from a fiscal perspective to have that satellite office there. We don't have a satellite office here. Maybe that's an option. They've got a satellite office. Okay, well, I stand corrected.
The guy comes out and watches TV.
Oh, so the person comes from, so they're not based in Fintry, they come from the, sorry, they come from RDCO and over to
We're
Fintry.
gonna know this, we could have a block.
Gotja.
The Warden Pump House has a flushing toilet, a small kitchen, and internet access.
Good.
It is a small office, I guess, if you're talking region, that's probably the closest we would come to a regional satellite
Yeah.
office, regional district probably.
Okay,
I know that the engineering guys, because it is a water station, but I see building inspectors and others there, so it is a spot where obviously there's a washroom.
yes.
You know?
Yeah.
So flushing toilets, nice when you're this far out of town, sure.
Indeed.
Anyway, I'm happy to hear that there's a study going on. Something we badly need. The contract, there's people in our community that contract is very inexpensive relative to all the overhead we've got right now.
You're talking water system.
Yeah, talking about
We do, again, have a fellow in West Shores, and he does manage the water system in Casa, which is 506 connections. And he manages the water and sewer system over there for Oryx. Well, it's private system, the Oryx.
Yeah.
By Oryx. Oh, okay.
Question for Alan, about service reviews. How common is it to have service reviews in regional districts?
Quite common. Yeah.
Every 5 years.
Well, here at the RDCO is, in my view, kind of one of the more organized regional districts in terms of scheduling service reviews. So by policy, RDCO sets out that every service shall be reviewed every 5 years. And so they carry out what's called a non-statutory review. So that's something that's not triggered under the Local Government Act, but it's something that the board has determined is going to happen. So they conduct that typically using their staff, sometimes with consultants, but they do a bit of a deep dive into individual services. There's also a statutory review that any individual jurisdiction has the legal authority to demand a statutory review. And so that's when a particular service has raised concerns, and you can kind of trigger that review. And then there's a legal process that has to be undertaken.
So there should be a series of service reviews on different operations, some of them affecting the EA.
Yes, yes.
Is it possible?
Yeah, that should,
How public is that?
Any any past service reviews are all public information.
Comes before the regional board has public document.
Yeah, so it would all be there on the website.
It's kind of obvious we really need a
We'll
local
find it.
committee. It's kind of obvious that we really need a local committee. It's whatever, finance, or whatever. Have these discussions and have this information. And,
Can liaise with the regional.
yeah, it's so
Yep.
important.
well, yeah, okay. Well, you're anticipating where we may be going with some of these options. So thank you. That's good.
Let's.
I put it down to roads. Yeah, I moved it down to roads.
We realize that RDCO, RDCO does not control the whole. We understand that, but boy, we need them to advocate for us, for our side roads, the West Shores, potholes are so bad, up and down Hodges, to our main beach, Provincial Park, or not Provincial Park, but Community Park. We've got a lot of road issues. mentioned, and there's two issues, one's capital and one's operational. Capital, we've got crumbling roads, you guys drive that road, stuff with gas, and it's just dangerous. And we have, at least once a year, trucks as far as roll off that edge and down the side, and I don't know how many people have killed in the last 20 years. And yet you've got your kids running up and down the school bus,
Yep.
which is a real sore point. And we have the paint contract, it's nice to have this contract with Spanish company, but it's probably really cheap, but they don't deliver it. It doesn't seem like the ministry, highways is taking any action to deal with this, determine the contract, whatever, we have to get lower. Put in the roads. And maintain. So, I mean, these are all issues that obviously has to happen for us, and we don't feel that that's happening.
Right, yep, okay, thank you. I'll move down to the next one. Yeah, that's well said. The next issue is parks. I mean, you've raised all these, just parks, I should say.
Yeah, we have the same issue again of large scale vehicles modeling from Walnut, John roads. And going to the, what is it, pumping station, the set office. And not actually dealing with our walkways, steps going down the lake, and so we had a flood years ago, or they've been washed out, and it's like Jurassic Park, and down to that 400 foot drop from Warren down the Hodges Road. It's surprising somebody would kill themselves on that. We have walkways that they come out and cut the foliage back on twice the summer. It take a lot to take care of some of these pathways, and we do have to spend some money to put stairs in between Warren and Hodges, but local volunteers that would help the process. I don't know how we get artists to push parks, artists to step up and do some stuff.
So Wayne, how do recommendations go to RCO when parks need to be updated, upgraded, damaging? How does that process work?
Typically, what we've done with parks is the community association has a parks committee. And they meet once or twice a year with a representative from regional district parks, usually we Dartmouth comes out and meets with them. They give them a list of projects or stuff that they'd like to see. I think we've got this multi-use court up in Westford, and they come up with these ideas, the paving down there, the extra floats, and the dog beach and issues like this, and they bring it to parks. And usually you make one or two requests, you'll get something the next year, right? You don't
So there is a
get everything you ask for, but yeah, no, the communications between the community association and parks is a pretty good one, right? Yeah, I have to say that because my wife's been doing that for a number of years, right? So I don't want to get afoul of her there, but yeah, they have had a good relationship, and I know that Michelle can pick up the phone. She can phone Wayne Darlington when they sunk the float and things like that, and she gets a pretty good response on the parks. Yeah, pretty good. And our parks are Tilley Beach and Westshore are both looking good.
So our community parks and
No, the walkways to the parks.
oh, okay.
And we've got registered walkways, and they're a mess. They're dangerous.
That means
We call them
They're actually kind
yeah, they were multi access years and years and years.
you're saying.
Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, because they do all the subdivision stuff on the roads and that. So they put in these accesses between this road and that road so that you could walk. But over the years, the neighbors closed it down to a large extent because they didn't want people walking next to their place. So there was issues there. But the main one that you're talking about is from Killarney Way down to Udell.
Well, up and
Because
about.
that would improve the parking for the beach.
Growing trees and then we'll expand the parking area, so she got little signs saying, we can move over and still do that 18 inches.
So they've encroached on the right.
We actually did have a good conversation between the regional district and Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure in 2017 or 18 when we had the flooding, because the water went down there and the regional district has a water line to that hydrant right underneath that right of way. So that's what we were talking about is highways putting its protection, some rocks or something, and then engineering or parks working together to create a set of stairs to protect regional district infrastructure. Like I said, you know, it's just about washed out that water.
So someone from the RDCO would have to enforce that, right? Like these people that are now kind of saying, hey, this is like a property for me, and they're building whatever on the right of way. You know, the RDCO, are the people who would have to enforce that, and what do people say? Hey.
Well, Ministry of Transportation would do a tender on the property and it would become yours, so that it's not their responsibility anymore. Now it will be someone's responsibility. As liability, yeah, exactly. Somebody's got to be responsible. Yeah, I know.
Bylaw services, bylaw enforcement.
I know we just settled it on Facebook.
Because we've had people being attacked by the blocks and actually point out and still couldn't come up. That's what's going to consume the attack. You know, came up to some direction.
I checked the parks. You're gonna check the parks. Go check West Shores Park, go check Killing Beach Park, and they're looking for dogs off leash and that sort of thing. You're not gonna be lucky enough to catch them doing the other stuff that you need to catch them doing, right? But off leash and that sort of thing, both the park ranger and dog control. I've seen them more in the last year or so than I've seen them in a long time.
Another issue, I mean, of course, line with that is the fact that we are taking underserved away from pulling them and killing 4 hours of someone's time and have to travel, again, we could contract this service. Call other bases or home construction development standards, I was hoping Josh would be able to talk more about myself. But we have a lot of people right now that are rebuilding their homes and trying to get trades from, Canada, and North Okanagan. These people have to go from Dornan to Kelowna, building plants, and have to do the business license in Kelowna to work in our area. And people just don't want to come up there. It impacts costing, competitiveness, and just process a lot more to get services done because of the requirements that RDCO has set up for Kelowna and then it won't work for us.
So RDCO though doesn't set, like, when you say set up for Kelowna, do you mean like an urban area or the city of Kelowna itself?
Well, I mean, they've set up, the whole building, development, and zoning bylaws, and they've set up all of this stuff. They set up, I assume they set up the requirements for business licenses.
Okay.
That's the biggest area.
Yeah.
If you're a North Okanagan regional district contractor and you come to work out here, you have to get a business license at the Central Okanagan Regional District and any of your paperwork, your business license, and the rest of that obviously has to come out of Kelowna as well.
Yes.
So
There's a lot of.
Get a little burden.
If you're working in the North Okanagan, there's a lot of running back and forth, a lot of simple.
I've heard that one.
Okay.
Comments to one, the zoning bylaws.
Okay.
Policing and ambulance services, provided at Bentley or Armstrong, and they have a reporting relationship with the regional district of North of Okanagan, but not central of Okanagan, so we have two. Schools and busing. Ambulance services too.
Yeah.
You did answer my comments on there are tax dollars in here. We're in hospital versus.
Yes.
It's not direct.
No, it goes, yeah, that's right. It goes, so Vernon Hospital, so all of our stuff here is within which is the hospital, the core of the, right, and, okay, yes. So it's all interior health, yes, but we do have the regional hospital district is with interior health okay, yes, and so that is, so the monies will go into the RDCO Regional Hospital District here, which will focus on buildings in the Kelowna or in the RDCO area.
Yeah, I know. So we've had residents who said, you know what? Going to hospitals in Kelowna, would probably be more, more operating rooms and more resources. Similar comment we have for schools because it's plus hours and geez, some families have kids going to Vernon and Kelowna, so we have holidays, they're doing holidays and Vernon, it just destroys, quality planning. Now the problem is you can't send the kids to Vernon because you're down at schools. The excess always seems to be gone.
Well, no, West Kelowna is at 114% of their schools, and I think Kelowna's as bad, if not worse.
Is that,
Oh, yeah, no, the schools.
but yet we still have our, we're still shipping markets to home.
That's a cash return.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's a
No.
lot faster and easier to learn.
Back to that line on the map,
I don't think that has anything to do with the artist, right? The school.
That is-
No, it has to do with whether it's tied to WCO or tied to our town.
seems to me the school district is the same as the regional district in
That's what we change.
In the country.
the outline map.
If, let's say we were to go over to RDN, then we would automatically change that to the different school guidelines.
I think that would probably follow fairly quick.
Well, it wouldn't be automatic. So there'd have to be representations made. There'd have to be a process put in place. That would be up to the school districts and the Ministry of Education.
And District 22 has never been the problem. I've talked to them on many occasions. They are perfectly willing to take the students from here. They seem to think that the problem was coming from our own catchment area.
So it would be a 5 hour to do that for RDN, not.
Non-automatic, non-automatic, correct. And I mean, that's an interesting point about the possible resistance on the part of 23, because yeah, I mean, school districts get funding per pupil, so.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, it's money.
Yeah.
For sure. Big bucks there.
Trading and retail center, is indicating that most of the residents have a natural trading relationship with Vernon Armstrong. The closer to the roads, travel on, families and children participate in recreational areas. Healthcare services, doctors, medical labs, hospitals, all surrounded with access to Vernon, employment, banking services. Were provided as examples of daily activities generally conducted in Vernon. You're a Finch, so you're on a kind of a halfway point in this.
Yeah.
Where we are, we're probably very, in the sun, so very similar to Fintry. It's not like 6 and 1 half and the other across in the sun.
So the road makes a choice. The road makes a choice for you.
Outside, I'll try to avoid it.
And we actually got a doctor in Westside design. So,
The RDCO board voted on this, and we talked a lot about that. And I had mentioned earlier, I mean, it's really greater to one voting structure because you've got West Kelowna and Richmond, and they're all so tied into. And, if we're using any political favors. Try to keep the Kelowna masters happy.
Well, although we heard Wayne say earlier that there's a lot of support for the electoral areas from Beachland, from Lake Country, parts of, yeah, did you not?
Oh, yeah, I don't know, not enough to sway.
It depends on what it is. Depends on what it is.
We put a paragraph in there just about the fact that this community has a lot of local skills and talents. And we could do a lot of the things, a lot of the services that we get from RDCO, we would do contract. And I think right sizing, and right size solutions for the 300 versus 5,000 water system. is really something we have to look at. And finding supports within our communities, we don't have travel time, travel wear and tear on vehicles. And distance supervision. A lot easier for individuals that would communicate.
I think this is for them, that it's got. That's who we report to. We have another layer of. Look over the subcontractors. For this financial. Reduce the governance from seeing. So that the committee has more input. We have two people driving up there. Have lunch.
Yeah.
Get a lot more effective.
There's lots of issues.
Okay, thank you very
And
much.
when you see those regional district cards buy it, on the bottom of the door, it'll say engineering or planning or bylaw or park ranger or whatever. You know, it identifies the department that they're from, right? So it's not like you could just take the water guy, put in the dog control guy and send them both out here. You know, it's our distance and that. This is where we got wrong.
In the municipality, we have a bylaw officer with running all of them. This is- and we can contract that sort of stuff. Yeah, yeah.
And that's a legitimate point to raise, I think, and it really talks about, and Daryl referred to it earlier and Wayne referred to it, this idea of how we're providing a certain service, how the RDCO is providing a certain service, the idea of reviewing those services, recognizing too that the same kinds of questions are being asked in RDNO as well. I think I told you that they had 19 service reviews underway at once because jurisdictions had the same kinds of questions we're hearing now, like why are we paying so much for this? Why are we paying for that? Who's paying what? Why comes those people get more of a say than we get? So to some degree, it's not unique to RDCO, but that's not to diminish the issues you've raised today and whether they're symptoms or underlying causes. It's all legitimate stuff. And so thank you for bringing that forward. And thank you to Scott and Josh for taking the time to articulate it in writing so we can make sure that gets in the record.
There is those three issues that we're asking for response to.
Yeah.
As well as have they, has already still written to Mr. Transport, found a formal letter of complaint about next year.
Okay.
Because we have to
Yeah.
advocate on their behalf. And, you know, we parks, we try to get some stuff on pathways and walkways and try to stop somebody from getting killed.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, so are those pathways actually RDCO? They're not owned by the RDCO, though they're registered walkway, but Ministry of Transportation owns all the roads. So if it was, you know, acquired during subdivision, for instance, that's the Ministry of Transportation's right of way. We might have an easement over it if we have water infrastructure under there.
I'm sure there is an easement on
So,
that
so
one.
there may be the ability to, yeah, work with Moti, but again, that's not, like if normally if we ask, hey, can we do something to this? We still have to go get permission from the Ministry of Transportation to try and do something, because that's their property.
They'll give them up in a heartbeat.
Ministry of Transportation to transfer responsibility.
Right. So we could, yeah,
Yeah.
looking to acquire it.
I think they give them up in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Yeah, they might be quite happy to give that up. But-
Absolutely,
But
yeah.
it just, yeah, one flag that it's not like it's already ours that we're then able to, yeah, do something about, so.
Yes.
I'll just make a point here. The regional district is viewed by the province as the senior level of local government. So when we get a check for the association every year, $25,000+, it comes back as $21,150. That's 16% plus. It's because they're recognized as the senior local government who are responsible for us. The advocacy to Moti,
Yeah.
to other partners, should just follow suit from the regional district for us.
Yeah, they are your local government, for sure. Yeah.
There seems to be a bit of failure in that regard. Consistent.
Point noted.
It's difficult
Sorry.
to drive that sort of thing before a full board. This is why I've been looking for the
Yep.
electoral area governance committee, because that's the type of issue that you could bring up to an electoral area governance committee, and the community could come in and say.
Which is a
right?
great
Whereas
segue.
now that doesn't happen at the regular board level. I think in the 7.5 years that I've been here, I think we've had 2 delegations from the northwest side to the regional board, and it's not from a lack of trying.
So,
Which is a good.
yeah, and Mr. Chair, if I may, that's a perfect segue into kind of some options going forward. Can we move on to those, or?
Yes.
Okay, and I know we're a little bit over time, so we'll move as quickly as we can here. So the goal this evening is not to generate tremendous discussion around these specific options we wanted to put on the table or put on the radar, rather simply just to kind of lay out the menu. And the reason for that is, well, twofold. I guess one, very practically, is that it's already past 8:30 and the committee's going to be tired soon. But more importantly, I think, is that we haven't yet got all the information back on the surveys. And so we don't want to kind of make decisions with respect to options until we get the full impact back and we've assessed that. So that said, we thought it would be helpful to get it on the radar, as it were, and go through some high level things. So, and Wayne's kind of picked up on the first one here. If we look at changes within the current local government structure, so that's the structure that has the northwest side as part of electoral area Central Okanagan West within the regional district of Central Okanagan. So how do we then deal with some of the concerns that we've heard around services? So around how those are delivered, accountability, transparency, all of those concerns that would come to the table. How do we deal with the concerns around having a meaningful say over services that we don't feel that we get at the board table, given the dynamic with both kind of a regional focus and then also with being one director out of 13. So those quite all legitimate issues. How do we deal with that? So one issue, one option would be the Electoral Area Services Committee. As we've talked about before in the past, most regional districts have electoral area services committee, probably all of them, but at least most of them. They are standing committees typically of the board, which gives them a certain level of stature, if you will, or status, which is important. they are separate forums or separate tables at which issues related to electoral areas, both in terms of matters. So kind of how do we want to advocate with MOTI? How do we want to do these kinds of things? And then also the services that are provided to electoral areas. Those issues, those matters, those services all can be discussed, studied. Actions can be taken out of those from those tables, recommendations to the board on what to do. Typically, boards like them as much as electoral area directors and the electoral areas, because in giving those electoral areas a separate forum to have that focused discussion and focused study, it allows for that to happen, and it allows those issues to be taken from the board table, at which we tend to focus on more regional matters. So both parties kind of win in that sense. So one option would be to have that electoral area services committee. Wayne has mentioned that in the past, and we've heard this from others, that there's been a reluctance to do that. I personally don't believe that reluctance is as strong or even as evident at all as it might have been in the past. But to Dwayne's point, the proof will be in the pudding and what comes out of this process.
We would need this regardless of what regional district.
Absolutely. Yeah. And RDNO has one set up, quite an established one. But the idea would be to kind of borrow from its terms of reference, from other terms of reference, and to look at creating a committee with RDCO, yes, to pick that up. The other issue, and Daryl talked about this, and Wayne talked about this, is that idea of either non-statutory or statutory service reviews. Now, we have a system in place every 5 years. To the degree that that's meeting concerns, great. To the degree it's not meeting concerns, which I suspect is the answer, then there are alternatives. One is to ask the board to kind of conduct a specific review on, and maybe go a little bit deeper than previous reviews, which tend to be done on a regular basis using a certain methodology. So maybe a slightly different, deeper dive on certain issues, whether that be water systems or parks or fire or those kinds of things. And the other idea then is to have your electoral area director, which is his or her right, to initiate that statutory service review under the Local Government Act. And that then compels the regional district to bring in a third-party mediator to kind of work through some of these issues on what's being provided, what the costs are, how they're being provided, what the alternatives are, and those kinds of things.
Is that the same as what's going on with this?
No, it's that there are fewer statutory reviews done in the province than there are non-statutory reviews. Non-statutory reviews often will be done by staff, which is totally fine in most cases. They'll be done by staff. They'll go to the board. It'll be a bit of a check-in to say, how are we doing in this particular service? Are there some improvements or changes we can make? Totally legitimate process and can be a very useful process. The statutory review is a little bit different in that it typically brings in fact, almost always brings in an outside party to say, okay, we're going to do the deep dive on this service. We're going to kind of bring back to the table, because everybody has a role negotiating. It's a mediation in essence. We're going to bring back to this table options for this group to think about and consider, and then we're going to mediate a resolution to this. And
Is that not happening with fire and water right now?
it not quite. The one for fire and water, it's a little bit of in between there. So the ones for fire and water, I believe, are using outside parties to do the research and to come in and provide options. But it's not a statutory review in the sense that it's still kind of a process controlled by the board rather than controlled under the Local Government Act.
Right, that,
Yeah.
that requesting statutory service review, is that something that goes through
Through the area director. Yeah. And it tends to be, I don't want to kind of throw it out there as like, oh, here's something to try tomorrow. You know, it tends to be something to consider very carefully, because it's a little bit of a declaration of you're throwing down the glove or the gauntlet kind of thing. So
I think sort of from my perspective anyhow, is if you're doing a service review, if you feel that the problem is internal, then you need an external review. And if the problem is external, then you could do an internal review, and hopefully the staff will be able to pick up on the problems that are coming from the area residents, right?
we all,
If you
yeah.
think it's actually systemic, then you need to go outside to do that. Otherwise, you just checking yourself.
Yeah, we really think, Sherry and I really think that these reviews should be done by outside consultants, but you know, just. Just teasing.
I think
We got our 4 minutes.
one thing too is that when there's trust issues.
Yes,
there
absolutely.
is a huge
Yeah.
reason to push for a statutory review
Yes.
as opposed to a non-statutory review. Whether those trust issues are, whether those trust issues.
I'm surprised that you think they're not trusted.
I never said that, I said, you didn't hear me out, I said whether those trust issues are founded, unfounded, or just a perception of
Yeah.
trust issues, I think that it's important.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I will sometimes, and this is not a plug, believe me, but I will work as a mediator on these reviews. And I finished one recently for Comox Valley Regional District, and it was the exact thing. The party that triggered it was a municipality actually, but there was, whether it was founded or not, they just felt that they wanted an impartial body to bring this forward under the legislative framework to do this. So you're quite right. It can be those things. Local community commission. This is a very interesting body. Now, there aren't a lot, there are very few in the province. We count them on one hand. They're one finger and not the middle finger. Yes, so we can. That's right. But they are a tool that is potentially underused and undervalued, because what they can be is in essence, I'll try to give a thumbnail sketch. They are a body of up to 7 people, including up to 6 residents of the community and the electoral area director. The residents are elected to this by the community. The terms of reference, which is passed by bylaw by the regional board, and the regional board, by the way, gets funding from the province to help set this up and run it. So again, that's kind of one barrier that is reduced. The terms of reference set up by bylaw will assign services and delegate authority to the commission for those services. Whatever, not everything can be delegated. They can't make bylaws, for example, but they'll sign authority where they can over the administration, over certain decisions for those services. They tend to work in the past. There aren't really many there now because it's not a well understood option, but is there as a tool. They tend to work in places where you have a kind of a defined, separated community, and that kind of is Northwest Side. We're quite separated from the rest of the regional district, geographically at least. They tend to work where there is concern in the community and a big interest in the community in certain local services. They work where key local services are provided by the regional district. And so all of these all these boxes get checked as a potential in this system or in this part of the regional, the electoral area. So it's something to kind of think about that we'll explore a little further and come back to the committee with as part of that menu.
Community parks would be a good fit.
Community parks would be, fire would be.
What else would?
Well, fire services. So those kinds of things. I mean, so, you know, I mean, we've heard a lot of concerns about, well, what's the relationship like between the local fire department and RDCO? Well, you know, maybe it's a different relationship when you have a local community commission that's playing that role.
How is that different from the electoral area?
It's different because it's got delegated decision-making authority and because the members are elected, whereas, yeah, by the community.
More power.
It's often presented as a good option for a community that has a big interest in the services it's getting, but is not interested in or really ready to incorporate.
Corporation light.
It's incorporation light, yes. It's like Bud Light,
Yeah.
less filling, fewer calories.
So,
Yes.
it's where your residents would show up and talk about what their concerns are. Even if they're not related to that service, they are kind of like your municipal council in terms of, hey, I've got an issue with this, and then your local community commission would say, we don't have any authority over that, but you know, your electoral area director is also on that group that's hearing those concerns. It's
Yeah,
somewhere
exactly.
that
There's an
people can
accountability,
have
there's all that.
That's in their community instead of showing up to RDCO in Kelowna to voice their concerns. Yeah.
You would just think that if it was really viable, somebody else would be doing it.
Well, you know,
It just doesn't
it
seem to be
is,
possible.
it's interesting though, Sherry and I, we make the rounds, we do these studies a lot, we deal a lot with regional districts. It's just not known. Like, nobody knows about it really.
Then why didn't you advertise it?
Yeah.
We're trying to.
We-
$5,000 per committee.
There you go.
I'm getting huge interest in this boundary move from across other electoral areas
Yeah.
across the province.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another one just down the coast there.
Yeah.
Emailed me the other day, wants to be kept up to date with everything.
For
that's
sure.
going on.
Yeah. Sometimes, by the way, I know the local community commissions have failed in the past where they couldn't get enough interest to actually put together a de facto council or commission.
Yeah.
So,
Somebody running Squamish last election.
yeah. No, well, that's why one of the almost preconditions is you have to have a really engaged and interested community for this to work.
Was it Pemberton or Squamish? Nobody ran it.
I think Pemberton maybe, yeah. Okay, and then kind of citizen advisory bodies, we've already got the APC, of course, that Eric's on, and I think you chair it, don't you, Eric? Or, yeah, okay, that Eric chairs? Yeah, okay. We've got, there's the potential to put together whatever citizens advisory committee. We've got the NWCA, which kind of plays that role as well. And so maybe this, we're talking about something along those lines there. Stakeholder voting opportunities. So, and Wayne referred to this a little bit earlier, whether we want to look at taking different services and finding a way to kind of bring them together so that there can be, services that involve only electoral areas. There's some creative ways we can look at which would address some of the concerns we're hearing, not all of the concerns. There's other ways to kind of say, let's, what if we have Kelowna fringe area, or we have the fringe area planning is a bit of an issue, or if we have right now, for example, because we have an OCP for the entire West Side, when we want to make a change to the OCP, because part of that OCP is within the fringe areas, we have to involve everybody. What if we made an OCP just for the Northwest Side, which is something we can do, and then that changes the dynamic a little bit. So there's those kinds of things to address some of the concerns we're hearing. None of these is a silver bullet, none of them is a panacea, but there's maybe a variety of things that can be looked at. And then finally, regional district outreach. I know the region, to its credit, has been starting to do some of this, it's on its radar. There is the 2021-2022 electoral area communication strategy, which talks about having newsletters, which talks about having annual budget presentations in the community, those kinds of things. So there's always that potential too. Daryl's giving me a thumbs up with his rolling eyes here, but anyway, it's all good. So those are just kind of some of the ideas there of within. And so not all of these are legitimate, all of these are doable, all of these to some degree would address some of the issues, and we put in front of the committee because it's important that the committee considers all of these different approaches. When we look at changes to the current system, I'm just plowing through because I know that the folks are starting to, I've seen yawns, and I know it's not for me. So it's so anyway, changes to the current system, there are fewer options here, obviously. One is changing the electoral area boundary. So that is kind of not changing the regional district boundary, but looking at, for example, do we create another electoral area just for the Northwest Side, which would, address a few problems, but not all the problems? Do we do something like that Metro Vancouver's done and amalgamate the two electoral areas to create one super electoral area, despite the differences in geography? Probably not that workable. So the other option then is to change the regional district boundary, which in practical terms means appealing to our DNO to say, is there a home there that is better suited to this particular community? So that's something that would address many of the problems, could invite other problems. And always be careful what you wish for. Yeah. Absolutely, and that's completely legitimate. Yes, and we may find that when you go to the altar, there's nobody there, but that's okay. It's good to. I've been there in my own personal life, and that's okay. Yeah, go ahead, Carrie.
Is it a possibility that there can be recommendations for some changes within the current structure at the same time as you're looking into going to the next phase?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think there can be that, sure. So in other studies, some of the things we've heard from the committee is, look, we want to, well, I'll give you an example. In Columbia Shuswap, different setting in a sense, because they were looking at going to an incorporation study. But when the committee, equivalent to this committee in the governance and services study, said, we want to look at an incorporation study, and here's this boundary. And what it said, it had a two-part recommendation. It said, we'd like to look at incorporation. And if incorporation's no good, then we have a default option, which is to make changes within the system.
So we can't make changes within the system while we're going to a study to go to the RDN.
We could recommend that. And the response may be, well, shouldn't we wait to see how these changes work within the system first before we go there? And that's not a terrible answer either. So maybe that let's give it a year here and then we'll go there, or if whatever the committee recommends.
My mind is the changes.
Yeah. Right.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to just kind of end, if I could, Mr. Chair, just with kind of going forward, because it all kind of brings it home, as it were. So here's our committee meeting tonight. Okay. Oops, sorry, I keep bumping that. The survey closes August 12th, as we know. So that's when we'll have the full input feedback from the community. We will report those results to the committee, and we'll make that public because everything we do is public. We'll report those results to the committee on August 21st. And we'll do that by email. We can always, and this will be the prerogative of the chair, we can always call another meeting if we need to. And so we will certainly be available for that, but we'll leave it up to the committee and the chair to feel that. The report to the committee, this report will be the kind of the amended interim report, which is the main kind of body of it, but then with the results of the community engagement, and importantly then with the options section as well, and kind of suggestions / recommendations the consultants would put forward, subject to the committee's input on that. We'll then have the committee meeting on September 8th, and that will be the meeting at which the committee will review that report. You'll have the report 2 weeks in advance. So you'll see that we'll review the report as a committee on September 8th, and that hopefully is the time at which the committee will say, okay, we like door number 1 and we like door number 3. We don't like door number 2, whatever it is, and we'll come back forward with the committee's recommendations. We don't have to go to the board till the 26th. So again, if the committee feels it needs kind of a second discussion, we're certainly happy to oblige.
So am I just anticipating that we're probably seeing you again?
Have you seen our business plan?
It's a pretty good.
We'll see. You know what? It's really, Dwayne, it's really the committee's call on this. Yeah. Well, this first phase will be concluded at least. Yes. And then depending on the recommendation, it'll be then, yeah.
So who do we go to then to actually implement something? Will you be our advocate, or will it be somebody else? What's the process after 26?
Yeah, so well, a couple of ways to answer that. One is it depends on the recommendations, but let's say that there are recommendations for changes to make within the system. Then those would be put forward, and the committee and the community, let's say at that point, would logically expect to hear some kind of commitment from RDCO, some kind of report back from RDCO. We've heard what you said. Here's what our plan is to do. The committee won't be around at that point anymore, because once it presents its information is done. So then you'll need to rely on your EA director and appeals from NWCA and other bodies in the Northwest side to monitor the implementation.
So we have to, at that point, we have to apply for more funding to get something articulated.
If things weren't moving to the community's satisfaction, and then you would need to look at other options. Yes.
You and your company, would you be in that position, or this is the end of your process?
That would be the end of our process. And then, but we tend to get involved when the province pays. So.
Thank you.
Yes, so, yes,
And the recommendations from this committee go to the board,
Yes.
they also go to the province, do they not?
correct,
At the same time?
exactly.
And our recommendation to the board will carry an action item in it?
Yes, and the board, so the way of that part of the process, so the report will be presented to our DCO board. The province will have already received a copy of the report. RDCO then is then obligated under the terms of the contract with the province to make a recommendation to the province. And the province and the RDCO can decide we have nothing to recommend. So thank you very much. Or they can report to the province. We've heard what the committee has said. We back this, this, and this, and here's our plan going forward. And so there will be that accountability. The province wants to see some kind of resolution out of this. Yes.
Typically, the board would send it forward with support.
Yeah, that kind, well, yes, it would be, yeah, well, that's up to the board, but yeah, I can't speak for the board, but
Typically.
let's say in most cases, yes, it would, the board would accept the committee's recommendations and put those forward.
And that happens on September the 26th.
26th.
And so we have multiple recommendations. And say, we push these forward, but.
Yeah, they can. And again, not to prejudge what and so don't hold me to this because I'm just speculating here, but in that situation, even the board hasn't been part of this study. The board's had staff here to observe the study. The minister's been present. The board would want to kind of be very careful in how it receives and how it pulls it apart. It would want to really understand, and it would want to, and I think it would need to really articulate its opposition to certain recommendations. And so, and all of that's going to be public. All of that's a public meeting. So the board would, under normal circumstances, a regional district board would be loath to kind of unpack everything and repackage it. So.
And I have repeatedly invited to all of our meetings.
Yeah, but you know what? But Wayne, if I can't, in defense of the board, one of your roles as the electoral area director here is to be that conduit to the board.
So,
So,
but I
yeah.
thought that I would make sure that they were
yeah,
all
absolutely.
welcome.
Yeah. But the fact that
Don't kill our sheep on the way out here.
the fact, but you know, I would encourage you though, that the fact that they're not here should not be taken as a slight. The fact they're not here should be taken as, this is a community process. For us to get involved would be a bad idea. In fact, that was my recommendation to the board. Like, well, the chair asked me if he should attend these. I said, I wouldn't if I were you, because like because that sends the wrong message. Like the message is, this is a community. We're not here to kind of, it's not a top-down process. This is a bottom-up process. Like the committee's got to gel and the committee's got to come forward with its ideas, not kind of with the chair of the board or the other directors overlooking it and kind of, cherry picking things.
And that's also why the board would support whatever your recommendations are, because they're honoring what the work that the committee has done.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Thank you. Oh, you got to adjourn the meeting, Mr. Chair. You got to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
There you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. Oh, our pleasure. And thank you for all your work. I just closed it. That should. Good. I didn't want to sound bad.
turn left. It's okay, this is normal. I was. Okay, yeah.
Oh, but, yeah.